Let's get started. So we're very fortunate today to have a very special guest from Tibet present a lecture on modernity in Tibetan Buddhism. What makes this so special is that our guest, Khenpo Sodargye, is the leading teacher of modern Tibetan Buddhism in the People's Republic of China today. So I would like everyone to close their laptops, put away their phones, and help me in welcoming Khenpo Sodargye.
First of all, I would sincerely like to express my gratitude to Professor Sarah today. Just now she gave me a book which is a biography of Serakandro, the famous Tibetan spiritual figure. This book is also her own work in its entirety. As a Western scholar who specializes in this field, she writes about the stories of great female masters in Tibetan Buddhism. I am truly delighted and also quite surprised from the bottom of my heart. Today I want to mention that a significant number of teachers and students at our university campus are also engaged in research on Tibetan Buddhism. They say they want to study the biography of Milarepa in detail. Milarepa, the renowned yogi in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, is without a doubt a very unique and remarkable figure. So today in this talking, as you can see, I'll start from the biography of Milarepa and then the modernity of Tibetan Buddhism. I would like to share this with all the young people here. So, making use of this short amount of time, I will share with you some of what I know and my thoughts from my own experience. Personally, it was quite a long time ago, back when I was still just a student in middle school, that I first had the chance to read it. At that time, I was deeply moved as I read, and I often shed tears. I think many students might not be brought to tears while studying, because perhaps some of your ways of thinking are a bit different from some of our academic and research approaches. In any case, what I actually want to emphasize today is that the biography of Milarepa is actually not a myth. It is the true story of an incredible real person in history. It's just like some people in Asia, when they study, for example, Plato or even Aristotle and read their biographies. They often interpret some of the different customs as myths. Sometimes this may not be reasonable. Therefore, my view is simply that during the process of studying, we should be aware that he was a real historical figure. He lived approximately during the years from 1052 to 1135, which is about 900 years ago. He is an authentic historical figure in Tibetan Buddhism. If you ever have the chance at any point in your life, you should visit the caves where he practiced. This includes the various places where he met Marpa Lotsawa. All of these still actually exist today. Personally, I simply believe that there is something in Milarepa's biography in particular that has inspired me. He was, in fact, originally a very bad and ruthless person. He actually killed dozens and dozens of people during his lifetime. He killed many people by some means. He even destroyed all the crops in an entire village. He was that kind of person. But later, because he met a very good teacher who helped him a lot, he went through all kinds of ascetic practices and eventually received supportive and helpful guidance from his teacher. After that, he practiced in his hometown for 9 years. In the end, after much effort and reflection, he truly attained enlightenment. He himself once said, "If someone works as hard as I did, then even an ordinary person in the world also has the chance to attain enlightenment in this life." I truly believe that through the study of Tibetan Buddhism, people may gain valuable insights. At that time, Marpa Lotsawa once said to Milarepa, with great significance, "You are a special person, and I am also a special person." In the future, a good and dedicated teacher like me, who is also enlightened, it might not be so easy to find. And it's not easy to find a disciple like you who can endure hardship. So when guiding disciples and teaching the Dharma in the future, you should not transmit the teachings in the same way as we did. So perhaps within the context of Tibetan Buddhism, Milarepa's way of relying on his teacher is rather unique. In fact, within Tibetan Buddhism, there are many other examples. For instance, Longchen-pa, a renowned Tibetan Buddhist master, and the detailed process by which he deeply relied on and placed his trust in his revered teacher, Kumaradza, serve as a significant example. And our own teacher, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok, who relied on the precious master Tulku Thupten. At that time, although there was not the same kind of ascetic practice as Milarepa's, if you compare their lives and methods of seeking knowledge with those of our teachers and students today, or some of the methods of study we use now, the differences are quite substantial. For example, when Longchen-pa was relying on his teacher, he basically went for long periods without anything to eat. Each day he would eat just a single pellet. He practiced asceticism in this way and ultimately attained enlightenment. As for our own teacher, actually, many of the teachers here have already met him. When His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok was young, his pursuit of knowledge was also extremely arduous. He often went several days without any food at all. Moreover, the entire process of studying was very unique. So, in the context of Tibetan Buddhism, especially when you look at it compared to the modern pursuit of knowledge, there are many differences, especially in terms of the spirit of asceticism. I'm not trying to actively promote or advocate for Tibetan Buddhism to everyone here at all. I don't mean that. But actually, today's topic is related to this. Nowadays, in this 21st century, Tibetan Buddhism is still like this in many ways on a global scale. Originally, we are now in an era where Buddhism is relatively in decline. You could say this is what is called the age of declining Dharma. But comparatively speaking, Tibetan Buddhism is actually quite remarkably flourishing today in the scale of the whole world. Quite many young people, scholars and intellectuals are very interested in this, especially in this particular aspect. There are actually quite many reasons for this. This is what I want to talk about today. To briefly explain this to everyone present here, Buddhism originated in India historically around the 5th century BCE and eventually spread to a wide variety of different countries as well as numerous regions across the world, reaching many places over time. For example, Theravada Buddhism, which includes Sri Lanka, Thailand and Myanmar, is considered the Buddhism of the southern transmission, that is Theravada Buddhism. Then there is the northern transmission, which includes China and Japan, and this tradition also has its own lineage. As for Tibetan Buddhism, it is found in Mongolia, Tibet, and many other places, including now in Southeast Asia and especially in India. Buddhism in India today, in particular, originally came from India, but now it can be said that it is being transmitted back from Tibet to India. Nowadays, much of the Tibetan Buddhism in India is actually carried out and practiced according to the traditional Tibetan model. As for Tibet itself, although it is sparsely populated and the air is thin in this area, and the plateau climate there is often extremely harsh, but its culture, namely Tibetan Buddhism in particular, is now loved by people all over the world. Why does it still possess such strong vitality today? There are reasons for this. The first reason is students in Tibetan Buddhism show great respect for their devoted teachers who guide them, just like Milarepa simply did for Marpa. He was asked to tear down many houses, but he never left his teacher. If it's someone from today, if a teacher said something to them or gave them some punishment, they might have run away long ago and probably wouldn't be so respectful. Therefore, I personally think that in Tibetan Buddhism there is a special reverence for teachers. This is not unique to Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, in the Buddhist scriptures, there is also the teaching to regard one's teacher as a Buddha, to respect one's guru as a Buddha. Perhaps this idea is somewhat different from certain Western concepts you may usually have. But just because it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. I saw in some related media the other day that nowadays, actually many professors at American universities also believe that students should definitely show respect to their teachers. It shouldn't just be a transactional relationship because of tuition fees. Respect for the teacher is also essential. So I think actually in Tibetan Buddhism, why does it have such a unique and distinctive appeal in some respects? It's because in its tradition, students are generally expected to demonstrate great respect and deference to their teachers. This is important, including some scientists. You see, yesterday, when we went to the University of Chicago, there was a physicist named Fermi who was well known and highly respected in his field, and his student was Yang Zhening. So when they have this kind of unique mentor-student relationship, these students gain much more knowledge in their studies. Socrates' student was Plato, the philosopher, and Plato's student was Aristotle. Then in Germany there were many philosophers, including Nietzsche and Freud. Some of these truly outstanding students in the world. They had extremely authoritative teachers. And this is something we might need to reflect on. In Buddhism, we often say the teacher is even more important than the deity or the Buddha. 10,000 cultivations, one thought of the Guru prevails. This means that even if we practice 100,000 deity sadhanas, it is not as great as recalling the teacher's virtues for just a moment. So if we as students or practitioners want to study the Dharma in a meaningful way, we must place the teacher indeed in a very important position. I personally believe that even when we study worldly knowledge, if you regard your teacher as someone very important, someone who truly possesses wisdom and virtue, then the wisdom you gain from them should be considerable indeed. But if you see your teacher as someone particularly bad and believe that all he says is deceitful, if so, then any lesson the teacher gives you, it may not be beneficial to you. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is Tibetan Buddhism possesses a very strong sense of logic. Because Buddhism is a philosophy and way of life that can truly encompass and address every aspect of our daily existence, including knowledges in the 21st century, such as what we call the humanities, natural sciences, and social sciences, and it clearly explains relationships between people, the relationships between humans and animals, and every complex aspect of the human inner world. All these are explained very clearly. I believe that many of you present here have studied Buddhism, and if you have studied Buddhism, I'm sure you will find that its scientific nature is actually indeed extremely strong. In this regard, whether it's astronomy and geography, or all the knowledge, understanding, and wisdom of the world, all of these are explained in detail within Buddhism. Moreover, the methods we used in Buddhist research are actually extremely rigorous and precise. There is a saying in Buddhism, I will not take the side of the Buddha or the world-honored one, nor will I take any other side. Whoever speaks the true principle, I will follow them. The Buddha also said in his teachings, regarding my words, you should examine them as you would refine gold, and observe them repeatedly. If there are mistakes in what I say, you do not need to accept them. The Buddha himself said that as long as you use wisdom to examine, if some of my words cannot withstand scrutiny, then you should not accept them purely out of faith. So I think, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are many, many debates which are conducted by refuting others' viewpoints in various ways in order to arrive at understanding. This should be a very rational perspective. If we find something unreasonable, we are entirely within our rights to abandon it. There is no need to accept something just because it comes from the Buddha or from a spiritual teacher. You must accept. You accept it, want it or not. There is no such saying. So this kind of logical approach should also certainly be worth examining in the eyes of Western scholars. I hope that when you have the opportunity, you will look into some of the reasoning behind debates in Tibetan Buddhism, because their style of debate is very direct and unreserved. As long as you spot a flaw in the other person's argument, you can point it out directly. If the other person cannot defend their point, then their viewpoint can be overturned. This is extremely important. Because some teachers here want to know, for their own understanding, why so many people are now increasingly interested in Tibetan Buddhism, especially people from Han regions and some Westerners. The second reason I just mentioned, as I previously explained, is that it is highly logical. And now moving on to the third important point, which is Tibetan Buddhism may have a somewhat different sequence compared to other traditions. It features a systematic and sequential approach to practice. There are enormous scriptures and treatises. The Tibetan Tripitaka now has over 100 volumes. There are more than 200 volumes of treatises. All the great masters from various schools have written countless treatises. The volume is vast, like a sea of texts. Yesterday, I went to the East Asian Library at the University of Chicago. There are especially large numbers of Tibetan Buddhist books in there. If we were to study all of them, it would be impossible within a human lifetime. But now, in every school of Tibetan Buddhism, regardless of which tradition it is, there is it's just like when we study in school. There is so much worldly knowledge. But if we complete a full course of elementary, middle, and university education, if we study in this way, then every school has a truly complete curriculum. So in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, you could say this. From the stages of the preliminary practices to the main practices, step by step, Sutra tradition, Tantra tradition, are all condensed into just a few books in total. For example, the book Words of My Perfect Teacher, which is about preliminary practices of the Great Perfection. I don't know if you study it here or not, but with a book as simple as this, as long as you study just one book, you can basically understand what this sequence is like. Moreover, for people at higher, intermediate, and lower levels, there are different teaching models for each. This aspect is especially well suited to the current global education model. In other words, it is very similar to the current teaching style. The progression is very clear. I think this is truly a distinctive feature. Fourth, and I have a total of 5 main points, because there were some questions yesterday. The fourth point is its experiential aspect, actually. It is quite unique and truly has empirical evidence. I see that many teachers and schools, whether regarding Tibetan Buddhism or other religions, their understanding comes from an academic view. It is entirely and thoroughly approached from a research standpoint and nothing else. But there is another approach, which is to personally experience and practice beyond just research. This is even more important. So in various Tibetan monasteries throughout the region, through retreats and long periods of dedicated practice, including the Buddhist Institute where I am now, we have a 15-day retreat every single year. During the entire 15 days, we don't speak to anyone at all, not a single person. Everyone sits alone in their own meditation room the whole time. Apart from eating a little food, everything is dedicated to diligent practice. This is very important. I don't know what your way of studying is like, but after learning, it is really crucial to practice regularly. It is very important to observe your own mind. Moreover, the knowledge you've learned from the studying. Through meditation, you settle your mind and think of nothing at all. Practice this. In the end, your original suffering and afflictions can eventually be completely dispelled. You can become like a second Milarepa in your own way. In Tibet, we also have someone known as the Milarepa of our time. This person is called Pema Dendok. Pema Dendok was born in the year 1812. He lived in this world for about 72 years. At the beginning, his experiences were similar to those of Milarepa. He was also very wealthy, but later, tragically, his father and younger brother both passed away. When people are generally prosperous in all aspects, everyone likes them. But when people fall on hard times, many others don't like them. Later, everyone in their community discriminated against his family. He and his mother lived together like beggars. They suffered greatly and became beggars. Later, when he was about 15, he met a very good teacher. Then he sought the truth from this teacher, and gradually, he practiced for 9 years on a mountain called Langlang Mountain. At that time, the food he ate was basically the same as what Milarepa ate, like some herbs and green grass from outside. Eventually, he truly attained enlightenment. In the end, when he passed away, even his body transformed into light, and it seemed that only his hair and nails were left behind. In Tibetan history, this is known as the rainbow body attainment. Later, many people did not believe it. The omniscient Mipam Rinpoche was an extraordinary scholar. In the end, he even stood up and declared that he was truly someone who had attained the rainbow body. Actually, regarding this aspect, you need to do some research. In short, it is important to note that academic research by itself is simply not enough. You must personally go and experience it for yourself and make direct contact yourself. Especially when it comes to certain aspects of religion, they are truly wondrous. So you really need to have your own personal practice and realization in order to truly feel it. Therefore, in terms of spiritual practice, Tibetan Buddhism can be said to be truly exceptional. If you go to various places in Tibet, you'll find that next to many monasteries, there are monastic colleges, which are basically equivalent to our universities. Next to the monastery, there is what's called a retreat center. For example, if a monastery has more than 200 people, there might be 20 people in the retreat center who are dedicated solely to intensive practice. This kind of arrangement is basically standard for every monastery. Now, Tibetan Buddhism's final trait is that it is highly practical. We know that nowadays everyone faces a lot of work pressure and is extremely busy. Relying solely on scientific research actually cannot solve many of humanity's problems. Especially when it comes to many issues within the inner spiritual world of people, one should rely on a form of faith or rely on one's own personal experience to resolve them. That is the best way. Why are so many young people interested in it nowadays? The reason is because no one is a fool. Everyone is very clear about this. If something is not useful in their lives, many people simply won't accept it, no matter how much evidence is provided. Tibetan Buddhism has a history of over 1400 years. In this rapidly evolving era of artificial intelligence, when everyone is using advancing scientific and technological advancements, who really has the time to embrace Buddhism? But the reason is that material things alone cannot solve all our problems. And the spiritual aspect, on the spiritual level, through practice, through meditation, through chanting mantras, through certain methods, things can be resolved better. If our minds become even stronger, you may solve any problem. Dealing with the world and with any issues in life also becomes much simpler. This includes many youth nowadays who suffer from daily emotional pain and the constant, unrelenting pressure to make money. Many people end up with depression. At times like this, I really feel that this is just my personal experience. It may not be something you all accept, but truly, understanding your own inner world and being aware of it is especially crucial. Yesterday, Professor Sarah also asked, why is it that Larunga Buddhist Academy is able to attract so many people nowadays? Is it because of its charity work, vegetarianism, or some of its worldly philosophies? Or are there other reasons? Personally, I believe it is closely related to the 5 characteristics as I just analyzed above. There should be a connection. So next, we'll need about 2 minutes for a presentation about Tibetan Buddhism. Some people nowadays, in particular, who may have never actually been to Tibet, scenes from our peaceful and inspiring Buddhist academy, or from certain special occasions or memorable events. Let me briefly show everyone first. It's about 2 minutes.
这是我们佛学院的红色的房子。
These are the red cabins in Naranga Buddhist
这
Institute.
是在关帝的时候的出家人。
This is in gathering for empowerment.
这是开发会的时候在家人。
This is just now that's monastics. These are the lay practitioners for a Dharma gathering.
这是我们佛学院有一个建筑叫大黄王。
This is a mandala for the Great Illusion.
这是开基勒法会的时候的一些。
This is a Dharma gathering for practicing Devachin practice.
这是很多在家人当时开发会的时候的哈达。
These are many lay practitioners waving kata.
这是我的上师金美彭措法
This
王。
is my teacher, Jigme Rinpoche.
他现在已经圆寂
He has already
3周年了。
entered Paranirvana for 13 years.
这是哪种的辩论课已经运动的这个讲解出来。
Just now it's debating.
这是民族上
This
师，
is the Lama mantra.
这是我们汉族的一些
This
出
is
家人
Chinese
听
students
课的场面。
listening to Khenpo giving teachings.
这是法王圆寂会的纪念法会的一
This
个
is
要素
a
项
Dharma
目。
gathering for Paranirvana
这是
anniversary
藏历
of
的一个功德
Pith
的
Jigme
法会。
Rinpoche. This is a nap offering.